Hello and welcome. I'm Catalina Marchant de Abreu and you're watching W News, broadcasting live from the Arabiya studios. These are our top stories. Officials from the US and Iran hold high-stakes talks in Oman amid rising tensions. President Trump endorses Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi ahead of Sunday's snap elections. The Winter Olympic Games, known as Milano Cortina 2026, officially kick off in Italy. Iran and the United States have held high-stakes negotiations via Omani mediation today to try to overcome sharp differences over Tehran's nuclear program. Iranian state TV reported in late this afternoon that the talks in the Omani capital, Muscat, had ended. The discussions come after a U.S. military buildup in the Middle East in response to nationwide anti-government protests last month. For more on this, I'm joined by Sima Sabet, British-Iranian journalist and host of the Sima Sabet Show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for your invitation.
Sima, so Iran has just presented a preliminary plan to the U.S. in nuclear talks hosted by Oman that we've now reported have ended. So what is exactly in this plan?
Well, the negotiation, as you mentioned, is at the moment finished. It was reported that both parties are going to go back to their capitals, but there is no actual result in it. I mean, they both came with a set of conditions that they were hoping to reach in it. On the side of Iranians, Araghchi mentioned that they're going to negotiate not under military pressure or tensions, and also the nuclear is going to be the only part that they're going to negotiate. While the Americans, they had requested few conditions like proxies in the region, missile programs, including the nuclear programs. And also, Rubio mentioned yesterday that human rights in Iran also could be part of these negotiations. So both sides, apparently, they negotiated with mediatory of Omanis, but what results they achieved is unclear. But the negotiation is still going on.
And the U.S. said they want zero uranium enrichment. Iran says enrichment is its right. So is there real room to compromise here, or is this a deal breaker?
It is a deal breaker because Trump has mentioned several times that he wants zero uranium enrichment in Iran. This means that the whole nuclear program that Iran has built up for decades has to stop altogether. And Iranians, they see it as being surrounded. So total surrender for Iranians after spending so much, billions and billions of Iranian income and dollars on a program that has to be ended by the U.S. order in order to prevent a military action, it's going to be a total defeat for Iranians. So this is how they see it. But in the meantime, they are going to present themselves at the negotiation table in order to at least buy time.
And Sima, you do lead us to our next question, because I've heard many analysts this week say that Iran is stalling, buying time through talks, even going back and forth over the venue for the talks, for the location. So what does that tell us about Tehran's strategy?
Their strategy is mainly to build up a little bit more capability in order to defend themselves if they get attacked. And Iranian state TV today, they mentioned that there has been revealing a new missile called Khorramshahr, Fort Khorramshahr, which also shows that the ballistic and missile activities is still going on the side of Iranians. This is their only way to defend themselves if they get attacked. And of course, I mean, they are going to still try to prevent or at least being able to defend themselves if they get attacked. And we see heavy military presence of the U.S. and their navies in the region. So definitely they are going to use this opportunity in order to push it back as much as they can.
And as Iranians face repression at home, Sima, what's really at stake for them in these negotiations right now?
Well, they are deeply disappointed, to be honest, because Trump promised Iranians that he's going to defend them if they get killed by the Iranian state. And Islamic Republic killed tens of thousands of people. And there is a sense of betrayal on the side of Iranians, especially the protesters. They got massacred by Iranian state. And still there are thousands and thousands of families that they are still burying their children, they are mourning, and there is a sense of sadness inside Iran. And now Americans and Iranians are at the negotiation table. Of course, Islamic Republic doesn't have any legitimacy inside. And being at the negotiation table, it means that they are apparently taken seriously outside. Whatever is the result of these negotiations, I'm sure that there would be this sense of dissatisfactions amongst the protesters inside Iran. And they don't want to be part of the history of betrayal. They would see this as being deceived somehow. As it happened in Hungary in 1956, which they were promised that they're going to be defended, they're going to send help for them, and then it didn't happen, and those protesters were killed. So I hope that this is not the case of Iranians, but many inside Iran, they hope that this negotiation is not going to reach any results and is going to lead somehow to overthrow of Islamic Republic.
That's right, because as you did mention, President Trump told Iranians help is on the way, and now he's negotiating. The U.S. still doesn't rule out military action just yet, at least. So what happened to talks of leadership change?
Well, leadership change in terms of being after the attack, after the Islamic Republic, or having Islamic Republic in place?
Excuse me? Both.
When you're talking both.
Yes,
well,
Sima.
If Islamic Republic stays in place, so Ali Khamenei still is going to be there, and he's the main reason that they cannot reach any kind of somehow agreement with the U.S. because he is very highly ideological. He sees America as one of the biggest threats, as an enemy. And being flexible in terms of missile or nuclear program, which he sees is as something Islamic and Shia kind of weapon, then for him is a different matter. It's not about the national security. It's not about the national interest. It's not about Iranians. And also there is a complete gap between the state and the people who they were killed on the streets in tens of thousands, and the brutality that was used to suppress them. So I guess, Iranians, they're not going to look up for Islamic Republic to be continued. They want a new start. They want a country that is led by leaders who they are seeking peace in the region, who they are seeking to have good economic development, who they are looking in order to have whatever is good for the country.
Looking ahead, of course, we can't predict anything because it's ever so changing weekly, right? But if these talks do collapse, what do you think would be the next move for Iran, for the U.S.? U.S. side on Iran, perhaps tougher sanctions, military pressure, or further escalation?
Well, military and sanctions are already in place. Military presence of the U.S. in the region shows that there could be an attack if the negotiations fails. So the question could be whether we are going to have a limited scope of attack, or they are going to have a wider range of attack. At the moment, we see that they are building up on the defense side of the U.S. Military in the region. So possibly, they are going to prevent any reactions from the Iranians in order if there is any military tensions going on. But whatever that happens in that military tensions between Islamic Republic and the U.S., if Islamic Republic survives, it's going to be a much, much bigger danger for Iranians and also for the whole region, because then they are going to be delusional in terms of defeating America, surviving at that stage.
That was Sima Sabet for us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Senior government officials in the United Kingdom are preparing to hand over communications they had with the former U.S. Ambassador Lord Mandelson. It comes ahead of the release of key evidence surrounding his appointment, as there's growing pressure for other ministers, including Prime Minister Keir Starmer, to reconsider their positions amid the scandal. Starmer has apologized to Epstein's victims and said he was sorry for having believed Mandelson's lies. For more on this, I'm joined from London by our correspondent, Oli Barrett. Thank you for joining us. Oli, some MPs are saying that Keir Starmer needs a miracle to save him from the Mandelson scandal, many calling him to step down. Do you think that Starmer can survive the scandal?
Well, the difficulty in that for Keir Starmer in terms of hanging on to his job is that the Mandelson saga is potentially now going to drip bits of information into the public domain repeatedly over the coming days, weeks, perhaps even months. Even today, we have heard that police here in the UK are raiding 2 properties linked to Peter Mandelson. The government is preparing to publish some documents related to communications between Mandelson and others around the time that he was appointed US ambassador. As those come out, there are potentially further revelations which may make life difficult for Keir Starmer as well. And it's not just this particular controversy that is dogging Keir Starmer. Many of his own Labour MPs believe his leadership in a whole raft of areas has been wanting. They have been dismayed by U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. We have a key by-election coming up at the end of this month, which Labour may well lose. If they do, that will be incredibly difficult for his position as leader. Then there are local elections coming up here in the UK in May. If Labour do very badly in that, if he's still in his job, that would be very difficult indeed for him as well. So while Keir Starmer is probably going to be surviving in his post until the weekend here in the UK, exactly how long that can last is just really difficult to predict at the moment, if not impossible.
And we're talking about perhaps a broader political fallout here also with the now Mandelson files. We're talking here about Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's chief of staff, who's also facing scrutiny. Some say McSweeney was the driving force actually behind Peter Mandelson's appointment as ambassador despite his links to Jeffrey Epstein. So what is Number 10's strategy right now? Will he take the fall?
At the moment, Number 10 is saying that Morgan McSweeney has the full confidence of the Prime Minister. In PMQ's Prime Minister's Questions on Wednesday of this week, the Prime Minister said that Morgan McSweeney was essential to his government, and they are very, very close indeed. Keir Starmer, I think, credits Morgan McSweeney to a large extent for the fact that they won the last general election here in the UK 18 months or so ago. But many in the Labour Party believe that Morgan McSweeney should be losing his job at this point, and many in the Labour Party believe that if he is the brains behind the Keir Starmer operation, then those brains haven't really been on display in the last 18 months or so, given the travails of the government that he is so critical in. If Keir Starmer were to be minded to make him a sacrificial lamb at some point, he would also have the decision to make about exactly when to do that. Do you do that in the midst of this crisis because of the links to Mandelson? Do you wait until that by-election I mentioned? Do you wait until the May local elections? You can only sack Morgan McSweeney once, of course, and that will be certainly being factored into Keir Starmer's decision-making, I'm sure.
And do we know any more about what Number 10 actually knew at the time that they appointed Mandelson? Because it seems, at least personally, difficult for me to believe that they trusted him so blindly.
Well, that's what has made so many Labour MPs so angry, because they will say, whatever Peter Mandelson was saying to you at the time, it was in the public domain that he had had contacts and a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, indeed beyond the point at which Jeffrey Epstein was convicted. But more than that, he had a very checkered political career. He had lost his job in government several times before. He was known as the Prince of Darkness. And so Labour MPs are saying, look, you can't make the case now that Mandelson lied to you and that's why you gave him the job. It was an error of judgment at the time, given what everyone already knew about Peter Mandelson, whatever you might have thought he might have brought to the job in Washington in terms of qualities and in terms of dealing with American officials. And that's exactly why some Labour MPs are so angry with the Prime Minister, is that this week he's been apologising to victims of Jeffrey Epstein, but also saying that he believes that Labour MPs' anger is directed at Peter Mandelson for lying. Well, many Labour MPs' anger is actually directed firmly at Keir Starmer himself.
And we're seeing now one of the few criminal indictments from the Epstein files, and not in the US, but in the UK. So what does this say about each country, of how it's handling the fallout differently?
There are definitely differences between how the fallout has been handled, how the investigation has been run by journalists on both sides of the Atlantic as well. Here in the UK, journalists have been picking away at whatever documents they could find for a long time, going through them in great detail, looking for links to potential members of the British establishment, and they continue to do so. And that's one of the reasons this week has been so difficult for Keir Starmer, is that through these thousands and thousands of documents, it's taken journalists some time to investigate and search through all of those many thousands of words and pieces of paper and emails in various different directions. And so that's why, as I say, there's been that drip of information through the week and drip of revelations that have made life even more difficult as the week has gone on for Keir Starmer.
And Ollie, a new email appears to directly contradict Prince Andrew's claim about a photo with his accuser, Virginia Giuffre, wasn't real. So how serious is this new evidence?
It's certainly serious, and Andrew has always denied wrongdoing. But as you say, he had denied being in that picture. He had said it perhaps had been manufactured in some way. He had always said that he had never met Virginia Giuffre. And this latest email in this batch of released documents does seem to confirm that it was, in fact, Andrew in the photo that we are talking about. So that is problematic for him. As I say, he continues to deny any wrongdoing, but this very week he has finally moved out of Royal Lodge, that property in Windsor that King Charles had been trying to get him out of since the time when he stripped him of the final of his royal titles over his links to Jeffrey Epstein. So another very difficult week for Andrew, and therefore the royal family as a whole as well. And the scrutiny on Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor instead of Prince Andrew, very much continues.
Ollie Barrett joining us from London. Thank you. Now to India, Arabiya, an explosion in an illegal mine has killed several, with more still believed to be missing. As rescue operations continue, Jan David sent this report.
A race against time. In India's Meghalaya state, authorities worked to free miners trapped after an explosion. For some, it was already too late. The incident has left at least 18 dead and 1 injured.
Today we had a very tragic incident where a dynamite explosion had occurred. As per the current reports, about 18 people are reported dead because of this blast.
The accident took place in one of many so-called rat hole mines, once common across India's northeast. Just big enough for one person to get through, they are notoriously dangerous. Estimates suggest since 2012, some 63 people have died in the mines in India's Assam and Meghalaya states alone. In 2014, they were banned for environmental and safety reasons. Following the tragedy, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has offered financial compensation for the victims and their next of kin.
Pained by the mishap in East Jaintia Hills, Meghalaya, condolences to those who lost their loved ones. May the injured recover at the earliest. An ex gratia of 2 lakh from PMNRF would be given to the next of kin of each deceased. The injured would be given 50,000 rupees.
Not enough for those that have lost loved ones. As rescue efforts continue, locals watch on, hoping for life below ground. Jan David, Arabiya English.
President Trump has endorsed Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi ahead of a snap election that will take place on Sunday. Trump said she's proven to be a strong, powerful, and wise leader, and that she won't let the people of Japan down. Let's head to Los Angeles to speak to Derek Grossman, professor of political science and international relations for the University of Southern California. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, Derek, why did Trump endorse Japan's Prime Minister, Sanae Takaichi? Could this help her win the race?
Yeah, so Trump now has gotten into the habit of endorsing foreign leaders, which is kind of strange because, I mean, U.S. presidents typically have not done that. They've only endorsed candidates domestically for governor or for Congress, folks like that. So here he is endorsing Prime Minister Takaichi, and it's really unclear how this is going to pan out because some on the left of Takaichi, I'm sure, are pretty unhappy about U.S. intervention, but those who are, in her party, in the LDP, the Liberal Democratic Party, which is hardly democratic, by the way, in a U.S. From a U.S. perspective. It's very conservative and nationalistic. And those who are on the right of the LDP, I'm sure, are pretty happy about it because Takaichi is extremely popular among them and, frankly, among most of the electorate in Japan. So my bet is it's not going to matter all that much, but I do for Japan's snap elections. But I do think that it sets a dangerous precedent because if the president is picking and choosing winners and losers within foreign countries, then that is blatant U.S. intervention in their domestic affairs, which is something that we have constantly pledged that we would not do. And it should also be pointed out that Trump's done this in other places like in Argentina, for example. So it is now a thing.
That's right. And Trump and Xi also had a phone call where they discussed Taiwan and Japan-China escalating tensions. So how is Trump now in the middle of both conflicts?
Well, so the phone call with Xi the other day was very interesting because Xi certainly conveyed to Trump that China reuniting with Taiwan from Beijing's unique perspective is an inevitability. And the message was clear that Trump better behave between now and April before he visits Beijing. Otherwise, the red carpet rollout, the 21-gun salute, all of the pomp and circumstance that he's going to receive in Beijing, that might be canceled. And for Trump, that would be a huge embarrassment. Trump fashions himself as a strong man, just like Xi Jinping. He wants to be in the club of strong men, to include Putin, right? And so it's clear that China is laying down kind of the parameters of what is to be expected on Taiwan. Now, the question is whether Trump will bite on that. I've written and spoken publicly about this. I'm concerned. I'm very concerned that Trump might make some sort of deal with China that pertains to Taiwan that could sacrifice Taiwan's security for some sort of broader U.S.-China agreement on trade or something else. And so we'll have to see how it plays out.
Well, tell us a bit more about why you're concerned, because Trump called this call with Xi Jinping excellent amid trade tensions and confirmed, as you said, this visit to China in April. So do you think tensions between both are now simmering down? And what should we actually expect from this rapprochement?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Trump's general inclination is that China is more important than Taiwan. Right. And that, I think, has been true historically. So he is in line with past presidents in terms of trying to prioritize the relationship with China over Taiwan. I mean, it's fair to say that we don't even recognize Taiwan as an independent sovereign nation. We recognize China, and we have a one China policy, and we acknowledge that China's position that Taiwan is a part of China. However, we also have a fairly long history of supporting Taiwan through arms sales, through providing for its diplomatic space, even though it's only recognized diplomatically by 12 other countries around the world. We seek to have it in multilateral fora, right? So there's always been this contradiction of U.S. policy in the Strait, in the Taiwan Strait. But I feel like what we're seeing with Trump is much more of a prioritization of China than we've seen in the past. And a lot of this is atmospherics in order to have a good visit to Beijing. And the problem is once you start doing those things, it's hard to backpedal if necessary. And so I think now Trump is kind of siding more with China, that Taiwan is not a priority. So again, we'll have to keep close tabs on this as we go forward.
And Derek, some analysts say that Trump's policies, notably his tariffs, trade wars, they've backfired, boosting China's global influence. So with countries, for example, like Canada and UK turning to Beijing. So do you agree with this?
Well, I think tariffs are always bad, to be honest, when they are universal and when they are broadly applied to different products. Tariffs historically have been used on select exports or imports, right? And it's usually to try to build a manufacturing base domestically or to do something domestically. And it's usually for it's limited in scope, limited in time. Whereas what Trump did last year in April, right, with our National Liberation Day, quote unquote, is to put universal tariffs on basically every country. And then I think it's 57 countries around the world face an additional reciprocal tariff of varying rates. And these tariffs have certainly alienated our allies and partners, to include, as you say, the Canadians. And this is really unfortunate. I mean, it's an unforced error. Now, Canada's relationship with China is changing because they feel like they need to diversify away from dependence on the United States. India just signed the mother of all trade deals with the European Union, right? Again, to diversify, at least in part, to diversify away from the United States. So countries get a vote in this. It's not just the U.S. making decisions. And so we are going to have to, I think, try harder in the future to repair these relationships and to find new outlets, because we are slowly but surely, or maybe rapidly, kind of undoing our influence in the international system by angering those who are friends of ours.
On oil now, Derek, the U.S. backed sanctions on buyers of Russian oil, including China and formerly, allegedly now, India. Can China and the U.S. reach a compromise on oil eventually?
Well, Trump is fashioned as the ultimate deal maker, right? And so I found it very curious how when the U.S. and India struck their free trade agreement earlier this week, he, posted to Truth Social unilaterally without Indian endorsement that India has agreed to stop importing Russian oil, right? India never agreed to that as far as I can tell. But what was also interesting about it is that he said, well, India doesn't have to buy oil from Russia anymore. They can just buy it from Venezuela. So I see what he did there, right? We take out Maduro, we control the country, we control the oil, and now others can buy oil from Venezuela, meaning they're basically buying oil from us. This is Trump's, idealistic world. This is his fever dream, right? But the problem is the market doesn't really work like that, right? You can't just, say, okay, buy oil from Venezuela. Venezuela doesn't have the infrastructure to pump oil at the scale that Russia does, right? They're not able to export it the way Russia can, right? So, and you ask any oil executive, and this happened when Trump invited the oil executives into the White House a few weeks ago, they told him, we're many years away from being able to take advantage of the oil resources in Venezuela. So it's really a non-starter. And again, it's just something in the president's mind. And so when it comes to China, he may lay out those types of deals, but they are very unrealistic.
Interesting, Derek. And now on to Cuba, because there are reports that the country only has 15 to 20 days left of oil at current demand. So what's the latest here? Well,
the latest is that the Cubans, they want to negotiate. and they feel like they have to if they only have that amount of oil left. And what's been happening is that since the U.S. seized Maduro, we have essentially done a de facto oil blockade against Cuba. And that's very unfortunate for Cuba and for the Cuban people. My understanding is that there is a massive shipment that's about to leave Venezuela, headed for Cuba. And so it's got something like 150,000 barrels, right? So maybe the Trump administration has decided that some relief is in order, but we'll have to see if that actually happens. Generally speaking, an oil blockade, right, that could bring any country to its knees. And, you know, I'd have to go back and look at international law, but typically a naval blockade, right, is an act of war. It is an act of war. An oil blockade may be considered similar, right, because it threatens a country existentially, right? So we'll have to see if negotiations can somehow get to some sort of an agreement on this. I hope so.
Derek Rossman joining us from LA. Thank you for your perspective.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at some other of the stories making headlines today. A senior Russian military officer was rushed to hospital after being shot in an apartment building in Moscow, in the latest of a series of attacks on top military officials. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov blamed Ukraine for the shooting, accusing Kyiv of trying to derail the talks on the war. Canada and France will open consulates in Greenland in a significant show of solidarity following U.S. President Donald Trump's threats to take control of the territory. Trump has repeatedly insisted that Washington needs to control the strategic Arctic island for security reasons. Last month, he backed off his threats to seize Greenland after saying he had struck a framework deal with the NATO chief to ensure greater American influence. Turkish intelligence has arrested 2 people on suspicion of spying for Israel's Mossad. Security sources says the 2 men had been on the radar of Turkey's intelligence agency. They were arrested in Istanbul and are currently being questioned by police. At least 30 people have been killed during an explosion at Friday's prayers in a Shia Muslim mosque in Pakistan's capital of Islamabad. More than 130 were injured in the attack. 2 police officials said the attacker was stopped at the gate of the mosque before detonating the bomb. The Winter Olympic Games, known as Milano Cortina 2026, officially kick off in Italy today, with sports including skiing, speed skating, curling, and ice hockey all taking center stage. The events are being spread across northern Italy, with 3,500 athletes competing from 93 countries and 195 medals up for grabs. One person who will know how those athletes are feeling is Olympic speed skater and owner of Roar Fitness, Sarah Lindsay. Thank you for joining us today, Sarah.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sarah, welcome. And the 2026 Winter Olympics kick off today. So what should viewers look forward to in the opening ceremony?
Well, that's this evening, and I'm feeling it already. You know, I'm getting ready to watch it myself and all those old memories coming back. But it's always a huge show. Even though some of the events have already started, it symbolises the start of the Olympic Games. It's a chance for the host nation to put on a huge show on the world stage, and for the athletes to be announced into the stadium as official Olympians. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be some big performers. We have Mariah Carey this year and Andrea Bocelli, of course, which will be incredible.
Yeah. And for someone who knows nothing about sports here, Sarah, you could walk us through it and summarize which are the events that are a must-watch and who are the athletes to keep an eye on this year?
Well, we have a Saudi athlete in cross-country skiing for the first time, so very, very exciting. Rakan Al-Azira, so we need to look out for him, of course. And then there's always the superstars of the events. So we have Lindsey Vonn, who has a huge story going on at the moment. So an Olympic gold medalist in skiing, and she has taken a 6-year break where she'd retired, and then she's come back recently, and on Friday she took a fall and she ruptured her ACL, which is an injury that can take months and months to recover from. So she did say that she wasn't going to compete, and then I've been watching in her Instagram the last few days. She's been preparing and she's been training and getting ready to perform, and then she officially did a test run today, so she's going to compete. So that is, well, that's one to watch.
Well, let's talk a bit more about Lindsey Vonn, right? Because she's making most of the headlines today for the Winter Olympics. She's competing despite this ruptured ACL. So as an Olympian, how serious is this, and how does this affect her chances of winning? She said, as long as there's chance, there's hope.
Of course, and you will never back out until that very last moment. So I was unsure when we first got this news whether she was just being hopeful that maybe there was a chance that she could go back on. But she has a leg brace. Like I said, she has been training. She's done this test run. So she is going to compete. Whether she can compete at her best and whether she can last for the entirety of the Games, because she does 3 different events, is another matter. But fingers crossed for her, because what a warrior.
That's right, because she has a history, you mentioned it, of retiring, returning, winning again, now this rupture. So as an Olympian yourself, how does this moment actually define greatness in sports and perseverance?
Well, that's exactly it. That is the Olympic spirit right there in a nutshell, because you will never give up. This has been your whole life, and you've been preparing for this event forever. So like I said, you won't quit until, you know, Fat Lady sings.
Now into politics. Politics and sports often collide. They shouldn't, right,
Yeah.
Sarah? But what's the latest with ICE agents? I was pretty shocked with this. ICE agents attending the Olympic Games. This actually caused an uproar in Italy. So will they stay a bit more low profile?
I think it has to be. So I think they're there for security reasons. But I think it's not something that you will see or feel on the ground. And I obviously will always look at these things from an athlete perspective. And it's something that the athletes, I'm sure, won't have to think about or deal with. My first Olympics was in Salt Lake City in America very soon after 9/11. It was just a few months after. And we were considered as Team GB high risk. So we saw a lot of, you know, we had armed guards behind our rooms where we slept, and we had police escorts everywhere that we went. But really, which is crazy, but it really didn't even register. We're focused so hard on what we're doing and competing and staying in the zone that it kind of goes a little bit over your head.
Yeah, so it's important to keep at least the sports people calm, right? So
exactly.
Despite Russia now and Belarus also being banned from competing as national teams at the 2026 Winter Olympics, we all know why. So, but some athletes are still actually qualifying as individual neutral athletes, no flags, anthems, or uniforms. So why has the Olympic Committee taken this approach?
Well, if the athlete doesn't have strong political views, you know, these athletes have still been training their entire lives for this. And, you know, you don't know what their views are or if they do or don't agree with things that are going on. So it seems very unfair to take that away from the individuals and from the athletes. So there are Russian athletes who can compete under neutral and just individual athletes.
Let's talk about Crotchgate, Sarah.
Wow.
So, there's reports that claim that ski jumpers are using unusual methods before their suit measurement. So how seriously should we actually take these claims?
Well, I don't know if this is true or not. I feel like you should explain that a little bit, but don't leave it to me to explain what's actually happening.
I'll explain a little. So this comes from German newspaper Bild that reported that jumpers were injecting their genitals with hyaluronic acid before being measured for their suits. For what reason? I don't know why. Maybe you can explain a bit more.
Yeah, so I can explain that bit.
The technicality, at least.
Yeah, well, there's so much that goes into the aerodynamics. And even just a small increase in surface area can increase the glide time in the air. So, you know, they're looking for any margin that they can get to increase their flight time, but it's ultimately still cheating. It's not doping. Yeah, it's not doping. It's, you know, it's a medical thing and you're being injected, but it's not doping. but it's still cheating just because it's not on the rules, because who would have thought of this? You know, just because there's not already a rule for it doesn't mean that it's not cheating, and it's completely unethical. The athletes didn't come up with this idea themselves. Somebody has suggested that this happens and they do it, which I think is unfair to put on athletes.
They're not going to see it. It's aesthetic treatment now. So now on to the next. What's one thing about life in the Olympic Village that our viewers at home never see?
I think it's the feeling. I think it's the atmosphere, because if you think how much one person's energy in a room can change how everybody feels, and I've never felt such a mix of energy in one place, because you've got people feeling all kinds of different things, but some people are super focused, some people want to enjoy the experience, and there's so much going on and there's so much fanfare that I think there's this huge sort of crossover in how everybody is feeling, and some people are still ready to compete and some people have finished competing. So yeah, it's a very strange and surreal thing to try and explain, really, but that feeling of it that I don't think anybody else understands unless they've been in there.
A mix of energies colliding. Maybe some love stories coming out of the Olympic Village.
Everybody always wants to know that bit, that goss, don't they?
Yeah. Well, Sarah Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today and for your perspective on the Met.
Thank you.
A reminder of our top stories. Officials from the US and Iran hold high-stake talks in Oman amid rising tensions. President Trump endorses Japan's Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi ahead of Sunday's snap elections. The Winter Olympic Games, known as Milano Cortina 2026, officially kick off in Italy. And that's all from us on W News. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on X. Goodbye.